Dobry wieczór Państwu. Witam Państwa bardzo serdecznie. Dzisiaj jest 25 maja 2018 roku, więc jesteśmy w przededniu Dnia Matki, który w Polsce jest obchodzony 26 maja. Zatem w Wigilię tego święta zapraszamy Państwa już za chwilę na wykład o tytule Szczęście. Czego nie powiedziała Ci matka? Zanim jednak rozpoczniemy wykład, w imieniu całego zespołu festiwalowego, który naprawdę dzień i noc pracuje nad tym, żeby móc Państwa ugościć na wszystkich wydarzeniach, witam Państwa bardzo serdecznie w czwartym dniu Copernicus Festival 2018. Dobry wieczór Państwu. To są oczywiście brawa dla całego zespołu festiwalowego. Bardzo dziękujemy. Organizatorzy festiwalu, którymi są Centrum Kopernika Badań Interdyscyplinarnych, Fundacja Tygodnika Powszechnego oraz Uniwersytet Jagielloński w Krakowie, tuż przed rozpoczęciem tego spotkania tutaj w kuluarach uświadomili mi, że jesteśmy w połowie, na półmetku tego festiwalu. Natomiast zostało jeszcze całkiem sporo przed nami. Jest piątek, startujemy z weekendem, więc mamy nadzieję, że w tym weekendowym kalendarzu uwzględnili Państwo obecność na wydarzeniach i w sobotę, i w niedzielę. Serdecznie Państwa zapraszamy. Tak samo jak i w poprzednich dniach, tak samo i dzisiaj jesteśmy również w internecie, tak więc witam serdecznie wszystkich internautów, którzy oglądają nas za pośrednictwem kanału Copernicus Center na YouTubie. Dobry wieczór Państwu, wiemy, że są Państwo razem z nami i bardzo dziękujemy za tę obecność, ponieważ publiczność festiwalu ciągle się powiększa. Bardzo Państwu dziękujemy. Dzisiaj natomiast Państwu, którzy są tutaj zgromadzeni, czyli Państwu w gmachu Muzeum Narodowego w Krakowie, w gościnnych progach jednego ze współorganizatorów, przypominamy także, że gdyby Państwo chcieli kiedykolwiek wrócić do materiałów, które rejestrujemy dla Państwa, śmiało proszę wchodzić na profil Copernicus Center na YouTubie. Debaty i wieczorne spotkania są rejestrowane, tak więc można do tego wszystkiego wracać, o czym dzisiaj rozmawiamy. Jeden ze współorganizatorów został już wywołany, Muzeum Narodowe w Krakowie. Pozwolą Państwo, że podziękuję innym współorganizatorom, którzy wspierają i współorganizują właśnie Copernicus Festival 2018. To Fundacja na Rzecz Nauki Polskiej, wspomniane wcześniej Muzeum Narodowe, Krikoteka, Tygodnik Powszechny, Krakowskie Biuro Festiwalowe oraz księgarnia-kawiarnia De Revolutionibus. Festiwal odbywa się dzięki wsparciu Urzędu Miasta Krakowa. Głównym partnerem niezmiennie jest Urząd Marszałkowski Województwa Małopolskiego. Dziękujemy także Małopolskiej Agencji Rozwoju Regionalnego oraz Miejskiemu Przedsiębiorstwu Wodociągów i Kanalizacji w Krakowie. I to jest moment dla Państwa. Proszę o gorące brawa. Przechodzimy do głównej części naszego dzisiejszego wieczoru. Dzisiejszy wykład wygłosi dla Państwa chyba jeden z najbardziej znanych badaczy zjawiska prognozowania afektywnego, czyli tego, w jaki sposób przewidujemy emocjonalne konsekwencje przyszłych wydarzeń i naszych zachowań. Ja przypomnę jeszcze techniczną informację. Bardzo Państwa prosimy o wyłączenie telefonów komórkowych albo chociaż o wyciszenie, tak żeby nic nam nie zakłócało dzisiejszego wykładu. Jeżeli ktoś z Państwa potrzebuje słuchawki, przypominam, że można je jeszcze pobrać po mojej prawej, Państwa lewej stronie, ponieważ dzisiejszy wykład będzie w języku angielskim. Ladies and gentlemen, the third lecture of the fifth edition of Copernicus Festival 2018 will be given by Professor of Psychology at Harvard University and Ambassador of Science. Ladies and gentlemen, Daniel Gilbert. Let's give him a huge applause. The lecture, Happiness, What Your Mama Didn't Tell You. Daniel Gilbert. This is the mic.
Good evening, my friends. It is such a pleasure to be here with you tonight, a pleasure to be in Krakow, for me, really for two reasons. First, I have Polish blood, and so it is a great honor for me to, for the first time, come to the country of my own ancestors and learn a little bit about it, and therefore about myself. It's also a great pleasure because I'm a college professor. And tonight is an opportunity for me to speak to a large room of smart people who aren't going to ask me what's going to be on the exam. So that is a very rare pleasure for me indeed. I've spent a lot of my life studying as a scientist human happiness. Now, we all know that for millions of years, human beings have asked, what is the secret of happiness? But what we all know is wrong, because in fact, The questions about the secret of happiness are among the newest questions that our species have ever asked. For most of human history, life was, in the words of the philosopher Thomas Hobbes, nasty, short, and brutish. Most people got up in the morning, and their main task was just not to die that day. Food was scarce, life was short, work was hard, health was bad, most of your children wouldn't live to adulthood, and everybody knew what happiness was. Everybody knew it. There was no secret. Happiness is what happens when you get what you want. And that never happens on earth. Not to anybody ever, maybe in another life, but not in this one. And then something really remarkable happened in the world. 3 revolutions took place. About 10,000 years ago, there was an agricultural revolution and we learned to grow food. About 300 years ago, there was an industrial revolution and we learned to make machines. And then, about 50 years ago or so, there was an information revolution and we learned to make technology. And as a result of these 3 revolutions, suddenly, for the first time in the history of the world, large populations of people all over the globe had what they wanted. And guess what? For the first time in history, they had what they wanted, and they weren't always happy. How is it possible that you can get everything you want and still not be happy? If happiness comes when we get what we're looking for, how is it possible that people who have more than anybody could possibly want, these 5 men have a combined net worth of 1,573 billion zlotys. This is the gross national product of your country. These 5 people have it. Now, I have met every one of these 5 people. They're very nice. They're not always happy. How is it possible that we cannot be happy when we get just what we want? Well, the answer is obvious. We must be wanting the wrong things. We must be wanting things that don't really bring us happiness. Why would that happen? Why would we be mistaken about the places in which happiness is to be found? Well, there are 2 answers, and I'm going to talk a little about both of them tonight. One of the problems is a problem with our own imaginations. We think to ourselves that we can close our eyes and look into the future and think about what would make us happy. Wouldn't it be wonderful to get a promotion? Wouldn't it be great to own a new car? Won't it be fantastic if she marries me? Won't it be terrible if I go blind? We look into the future, and with our imaginations, we decide what will be good and what will be bad. The second way that we learn about happiness is from the other people around us. Right? We're all members of cultures, of families, of cities, of religions. And the people around us tell us lots of things about where happiness is to be found. Psychologists call this in English imagination and socialization. But we can just think of it as our minds and our mothers. And what I want to show you tonight is that there are problems with your mind, and there are problems with your mother. Let me start by talking about the problems with the mind. Excuse me just a moment. Let me pour myself a little vodka. This will make the lecture better for all of us. Let me start by talking a little bit about the human mind. Now, human beings share many things with other animals. Like all other animals on our planet, we learn from experience. So you know here's a cat and here's a mouse, and if the cat chases the mouse quickly learns to respond to the sound of the bell that the cat wears around its neck, and the mouse learns to run away when it hears the bell. This is what Ivan Pavlov discovered, and it's a very simple mechanism, and all living animals have it. All of them can learn from trial and error. There is only one problem with learning from trial and error: the error part. The only reason we have big, fat, happy cats on our planet is some mice do not survive the error in trial and error. Wouldn't it be wonderful if there were just some way to learn from experience without having to actually have the experience? Well, that seems to be the question that nature asked herself about 2 million years ago when she completely redesigned the human brain. Some of you may know that in just the last 2 million years, the human brain has gotten 3 times bigger. Now, when the brain grows over time, it doesn't just like a ball go, it doesn't just get larger, it adds new parts. And your brain has parts of your brain that basically didn't exist a few million years ago, right here and on the sides. What do these parts do? They do many important things, but we now know one of the most important things they do is they allow you to imagine the future. Everybody here can think about experiences they've never had and decide whether they're good or bad. Look, this is a flavor of Ben & Jerry's ice cream. I researched this on the internet, and I'm almost positive you all have Ben & Jerry's ice cream, right? Yes, it's one of the very few things America exports that it should export, Ben & Jerry's ice cream. Now, what you also know is there is no flavor called liver and onions. I made this, didn't I? But why is there no flavor called liver and onions? If Ben and Jerry were mice, they would have to make liver and onion ice cream, taste it, and go, bleh. They would learn from trial and error. But everybody here can imagine the flavor of liver and onion ice cream, and without ever tasting it, know it would be bad. I know this seems to you trivial. It seems obvious. When is he going to get to the interesting part of the lecture? This is interesting. This is a miracle. This is a thing you can do that no animal on the planet can do. You can imagine a future and decide without experiencing it whether it will be good or bad. Pilots use flight simulators because it's very, very expensive to crash a real airplane when you're learning to fly. In a sense, nature has given you a life simulator right here in the front of your brain because it's very expensive to crash a real life. You can look at experiences you may never have had and you know which ones are good and which ones are bad. Winning the lottery, going blind, losing your job, having a baby. Everyone here, no one here has experienced all 4 of these things, and many of you have experienced none of them. And yet everybody knows which of these 2 are good, which of these 2 are bad. Of the good ones, which one is the better one? Of the bad ones, which one is the worse one? But what I want to show you tonight is that these things that you imagine about the future are often wrong. Because this life simulator is really brand new in evolutionary terms. It's kind of in beta testing, and it reliably makes errors. I want to show you 2 of the mistakes that the life simulator makes when we think about what we will like in the future. So let me start by just telling you about one of them. The first problem with the life simulator, I'm going to stop saying that, it's stupid. The first problem with our minds when we try to imagine the future is very easy to illustrate. I want you to imagine what might happen if I brought 2 groups of people into my laboratory and I gave one of them celery to eat and the other one I gave very large sugary donuts. And they finish eating them and then I ask them a question. I say, how many pieces of candy will you want to eat when you return to my laboratory next week? What am I going to find? Well, you probably know that what I'm going to find is that the people who ate celery tell me that they will want more candy next week than the people who ate donuts. The people who ate celery say, I'll want 3 pieces of candy, but on average, the people who just had a donut say, next week when I come back, I won't want too much sugar, maybe just 1 piece. Now, which of these is the right answer? 3. 3 is the right answer. It doesn't matter if you have a donut now, next week you will still want 3 pieces of candy. But I want you to notice something. 1 is the right answer to a different question, not the one I asked. It's the right answer to the question, how many pieces of candy do you want now? And that's because when human beings are thinking in the present, it's very hard for them not to think about the present. Every one of us is a prisoner of this moment. Every one of us is bound to the present moment, and it's very, very hard for any of us to imagine a future that's very different than the way things are and the way we feel today. Here are some pictures of the future. When were these pictures made? Most of you would guess, I don't know, maybe the 1950s, the 1960s. That's right. Why? How do you know this? Because these pictures, first of all, are remarkably wrong, right? This isn't what anybody looks like today. This isn't how men and women behave today. Here's Mom. She's in her spaceship with the little girl and the dog, and they've just gone grocery shopping, and they're coming home to prepare a meal for Dad. Well, that actually describes how I grew up in 1960s, but it doesn't describe most families today. These pictures look more like the time in which they were made than the time they were meant to portray. And that is exactly what happens when we try to imagine our own personal futures. I'll give you an example, and I'm going to show you tonight many results of scientific studies because I am a scientist, and I want to try to show you that the things I'm saying are actually based on very good scientific data. So here's a picture, and many of you are looking and thinking, who is that person? And the answer is, that's me. That's me when I was, I don't know, maybe 18 years old. Yes, you're not born this way, right? You start out with lots of hair and then it goes away. Now, here's why I'm showing you the picture. I am quite sure that when I was this age, I thought I would want my hair to look like that forever. Now, it would be okay if I still had hair, but if I did, it would not look like that. I would never wear my hair that way again. Why, when I was 18, did I think, this will always be cool? This is always how I'll want to look. How come I thought that? The answer scientists have shown is that 18-year-olds are stupid. That's right, they're stupid. They are. They're stupid, and when they think about the future, they stupidly imagine that they will never change, that they'll always be the way they are now. Here, I'm going to show you. Here's some data. A group of 18-year-olds is asked, how much will you change in the next 10 years? And a group of 28-year-olds, 10 years older, are asked, how much did you change in the last 10 years? Now, if 18-year-olds are smart, their answer about how much they will change will be identical to the answer that 28-year-olds give when they're asked how much they did change. Are the answers identical? No. 28-year-olds say, oh my God, I've changed so much. And 18-year-olds say, I don't think I will change that much. 18-year-olds are stupid. But, and here's what's interesting, so is everybody else at every single age. Because when you do this same study with 68-year-olds and 58-year-olds, they make the same mistake. Now you notice that the line is curved. And what that means is that people expect to change less as they get older, and they do change less as they get older. But what I want you to notice is the two lines are always separated. And what that means is that 58-year-olds look ahead and they say, I'm really not going to change much in the next 10 years. And 68-year-olds look back and they say, you're stupid. I changed a lot since I was 58 years old. For as long as we live, we continue to make this mistake, underestimating how different we will be in the future, imagining a future that looks more like today than it really should. Now, why is this a problem? What does this have to do with happiness? One reason why it's a problem is because we underestimate how much we're going to change in the future. We all build futures, we build lives for ourselves that are meant to maximize the happiness of the people we are now instead of the people we are going to be. Here's a simple experiment that demonstrates that. People are asked how much money they would spend to see a concert that is going to take place 10 years from today, and the artist who plays will be currently your favorite artist. For the old people, this is Taylor Swift, and for many human beings on this planet, she is currently their favorite artist. Now, when we asked people this question, here's what we found. On average, they will pay about 470 zlotys for a ticket to a concert that won't happen for 10 years, but it will feature their favorite artist. Okay. Another group of people is asked a different question. They're asked, how much money would you pay for a concert that'll happen right now, but it will be your art, it will be a concert by the person who was your favorite artist 10 years ago? Their answer, only 294 zlotys. This is a very big difference, but I want you to think about it. What people are saying is, I wouldn't pay very much money to see the artist I loved 10 years ago, but I'll pay a lot of money to see the artist I love now play in 10 years. People are very confident that who they love now, they will love in 10 years, even though they know who they love now is not who they loved 10 years ago. So one of the problems with the mind is that it can't seem to escape from the present. Every one of us is a prisoner of the present, and when we try to imagine what our futures will be like and what will make us happy, we're really imagining what would make us happy now and not what will make us happy later. Now let me tell you about, I told you there's two problems with the mind, and I will now try to introduce you to the second. You know, it's very warm in here, and now that you've all seen that I own a very beautiful jacket, I'm going to take it off. Thank you, dear. Okay, let me introduce you to the second problem of the mind by introducing you to three very happy people whose names you probably don't know. One of them says it was a glorious experience. One of them says it was the best year of my life. And one of them says I have never regretted the move. Who are these three people? Well, this first man is a man named Anthony Weiner. He is a politician. He was a politician in the United States. He was very powerful. He was very handsome. He was very rich. Many people thought he would become the president of the United States in a very short amount of time. And then there was one problem. It turned out that he liked to take photographs of his genitals and send them electronically to young women who were not his wife. Now, I understand in France you can run on this platform, but probably in Poland and in the United States, this is considered very bad taste. And as a result of this, Anthony Weiner lost his job. He had to resign in disgrace. He lost his marriage. He lost everything. Maybe you feel sorry for him. Maybe you don't. But would you expect him, when he looks back on this year, to say it was the best year of his life? The best? What was the worst year like if this was the best? This is remarkable. How can he be so happy when something so terrible has happened? Let me introduce you to a second man. This man is named Maurice Bickham. And Maurice Bickham said these words after being released from serving 48 years in prison. 48 years in prison for a crime, well, he did commit the crime. He's a black man, and some white men tried to kill him, and so he participated in the crime called defending yourself. And as a result, he was sent to prison for 48 years. Now, after he gets out of prison, the reporters come and say, "Mr. Bickham, how was it in prison?" And he says, "It was a glorious experience." In English, the word glorious is very special. It doesn't just mean good. It's almost the word we would use for a religious experience. Something so wonderful, so sublime, so transcendental that nothing else compares to it. I might have expected him to say, "It was okay, I met some nice guys, the food was pretty good, there was a gym, I didn't have to worry about paying my taxes." But no, it was a glorious experience. Okay. The third man I want you to know, I know you've never heard of this man. His name is Ron Wayne. And he says, I have never regretted the move. What move is he talking about? What thing did he do that he has never regretted? Well, Ron Wayne in 1976 started a little company with two fellows named Steve Wozniak and Steve Jobs. They named their company Apple. But after 12 days, Ron Wayne decided this was a bad investment, and he asked his friends, "Can I get my money back?" And they said, "Well, okay, yeah, if you give us all of your stock, your 10% share of the company, we will give you back your 3,000 zlotys." Okay, what do we know now? We know now that his investment of 3,000 zlotys is worth 225 billion zlotys. That's what he sold 10% of Apple for. Now, you might expect him to say, "I was such an idiot." But no, he says he has never regretted what he did. There's the contract he signed. Now, there's one more person I must introduce you to. If you're older, you know who these four gentlemen are, right? Who are these guys? The Beatles, right? These are the Beatles. There is Sir Paul McCartney, there is John Lennon, there's George Harrison, and there is not Ringo, because Ringo was not the original drummer for the Beatles. The original drummer was a man named Pete Best. And Pete Best played with the Beatles until the other three Beatles kicked him out of the band and replaced him with Ringo. And then about 2 minutes later, they became the most important musical act of the 20th century. Now, what happened to Pete Best? Pete Best continued to play drums. He plays drums maybe on some records you've heard. He plays for a studio, so he plays with different people who come in. He's made a living playing drums, but you've never heard of him. What does Pete Best have to say about this experience? Pete Best says, "I am happier than I would have been with the Beatles." Okay, you have met four people. All of them claim to be very happy people, and they give us a recipe for happiness, don't they? Here's the recipe for happiness according to these four guys. First of all, you should resign in disgrace and humiliate your spouse if you can possibly manage it. That's Anthony Weiner's advice for a happy life. Second, you should go to prison unjustly if possible. The longer the better. 48 years seems to be the perfect amount. Third, you should sell 225 billion worth of stock for 3,000. And then this is very important. Pay attention. Never, ever, ever become a Beatle. Is this possible? Is it really possible that these people are giving us the secret to happiness? Could this really be the recipe? Why are these guys so happy in circumstances that we all think should make them sad? The answer is that one of the mind's best tricks is called rationalization. It is the ability to see things in ways that make us feel good about the things that we are seeing. People are remarkably good at doing this, remarkably good at changing the way they view their lives in order to feel better about their lives. In fact, human beings are geniuses when it comes to rationalization. Look, psychologists study how people fare in the face of tragedy, how they do after very bad things happen to them. And I don't mean little things, I mean the biggest things in life. Losing people you love, being the victim of a very bad crime, experiencing a war, a terrorist attack. How do people do after these things happen to them? Well, there are four ways they can react. First, they can be devastated. That is, at the time of the trauma, they can be very, very unhappy. And even 2 years later, they remain very, very unhappy. They can also go downhill. At the time of the trauma, they're actually okay, but over the next 2 years, their lives get worse and worse until they too are devastated. Some people can recover. That is, they feel very bad at the time of the trauma, but then they get better. And then finally, of course, there are some people who we would call in English resilient. meaning that even at the time of the trauma, they are doing pretty well, and they continue to do pretty well and be pretty happy 4 years later. Okay, these are 4 patterns, 4 ways human beings might react to trauma and tragedy. Which one of them really describes human beings? All of them, right? There are some people in each of these categories. The question is, how many? We know that about 20% of people who experience terrible events will be truly devastated by them and will not recover easily or quickly. We know that about 25% of people will be devastated at first, but they will get better with time. We know that going downhill is very, very rare. Usually people who are doing okay at the beginning don't end up doing badly at the end, and you're probably doing the math. That's right. The math is that 50% of people actually do fine. They do fine when bad things happen, and they do fine for the rest of their lives. 75% of all people seem to be fine 2 years after a devastating event. What does this tell us? This tells us that human beings are not the fragile flowers that need to run to their therapists every time our shoelaces break. We are actually very sturdy. We are very hardy. We are very resilient. We deal with tragedy. In English, we say we pick ourselves up by our bootstraps. And it's a way of saying that on our own, we make ourselves better. And it looks like this is true about most people. We are made of sturdy stuff. But what's interesting is we don't seem to know this about ourselves. When we think about futures in which bad things happen, we imagine that all of us will be in the devastated group. That if we lose the people and the things we love the most, we will be devastated when it happens and devastated for all time. When we experience bad things, we find ways to be happy about them. That's what those 4 gentlemen taught us. But we don't seem to know that we have this capability. Look, here is a photograph that is meant to remind you of a very bad disease. It's called end-stage renal disease. This is a failure of the kidneys. And when you have this disease, your kidneys fail, and as a result, you must, for the rest of your life, spend 3 hours, 3 times a week, at a hemodialysis center, where your blood is filtered by a machine. You will have a very strict diet for your whole life. You will be on hemodialysis for your whole life. Your whole life will be a little bit shorter than most people's lives. You will never travel. There are many things you will never do again. This doesn't sound like a very good disease, does it? Well, actually, if you ask healthy people how happy they are, right now, that's the purple bar, they tell you, I'm pretty happy. And if you ask them, how happy would you be if you had this horrible disease? They think this is a stupid question. Wow, I'd be very unhappy if I had this horrible disease. Well, it turns out many people have this disease, and we can measure their happiness quite easily. What do we find? We find that people who are on hemodialysis for the rest of their lives are exactly as happy, on average, as people who aren't. Just like Ron Wayne and Maurice Bickham, just like Pete Best and Anthony Weiner, they are encountering a circumstance that they thought would be terrible, and they found a way in which it's actually okay. Just in case you think that people with this disease are very, very special, I want to show you they're just as stupid as the rest of us. Because they think that if they didn't have this disease, they'd be much happier than they are. But they wouldn't. The purple bars are the real world. The yellow bars are everybody's imagination of what their lives would be like if they were on the other side of the graph. Marcus Aurelius said it this way. He said, if you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it. And this you have the power to revoke at any moment. What he was saying was, it isn't the world that makes you feel good or bad, it's how you see it. Shakespeare said this beautifully because he said everything beautifully in English. There is nothing either good or bad, but thinking makes it so. We all have the power to change the way we see our lives, the way we see the world. It's a remarkable power that helps us feel better when circumstances make us feel bad. But what's so interesting is we don't seem to know we have it. And so when we imagine the future, we make mistakes. So these are the two problems with the mind that I wanted to tell you about tonight. There are a few more, but I wanted to move to a different part of the problem of happiness because I think I've said enough bad things about our minds. It's time to say bad things about our mothers. So yes, the mind plays tricks on us, and looking into the future can be very hard. But we're lucky because we are not on our own. We all know people who have been to the future that we are merely imagining. We all know people who are already living the lives that we have questions about. And their experiences can tell us a lot about our own. We're surrounded by people who give us lots of advice on how to be happy. We are all the recipients of a great deal of cultural wisdom. There's just one problem with cultural wisdom. It isn't always wise. Some of the things that we are told about happiness turn out to be true, but some of them turn out not to be true. I don't know if you like Coke, and it might make you less thirsty. It will not make you a happy person. At least not the kind of Coke they're showing here. Now, my translator said, please, no puns. I don't know if this one worked. Okay, so how do we know which of our cultural wisdoms are correct and which are not? Lucky for us, in the last 30 years, neuroscientists, psychologists, behavioral economists have all begun to study the causes of human happiness, using the same scientific tools that we use to decide what makes a butterfly migrate, or what makes a cancer cell multiply. Using all of these same tools, we can ask the question, what causes people to be happy? And what we have discovered is that some of the pieces of conventional wisdom that our culture gives us are right, but some of them are quite wrong. What does our culture tell us about happiness? Well, this is my mother. She's not this young. This is a picture of my mother in, 1965. And my mother, like your mothers, taught me many things about happiness. But she thought three things were very, very important. First, my mother told me that if I wanted to be happy, I had to get married. I had to find a nice girl and settle down. And I did. Now, my mother also told me that I needed to make money. She never quite said it this way. Instead, she would say things like, it's good if you're comfortable, or you shouldn't have to worry. But what she really was saying is, earn enough money so that your father and I don't have to take care of you. And then third, what's the third thing every mother tells their child? Babies, children, the real secret of happiness. So my mother said, get married, have money, and have children. Have children soon. Have lots of children soon. I want to be a grandmother. Now, I always thought this was just my mother. It turns out mothers all over the world give almost exactly the same advice to their children. From Indonesia to Africa to South America to Krakow, mothers are telling their children marriage, money, and happiness is the secret. Are they right or are they wrong? It turns out the answer is yes. They are right and they are wrong. Let me show you what we now know as scientists about these three things. Let me start with marriage. Now, let me do a scientific test. How many people here think that marriage makes people happy? Just raise your hand if you think marriage makes people happy. Okay, all the young people have their hands down. All the older people either have their hands up or their wives are pushing their hands up. You know, my friends here in Poland told me Poles are very cynical people. They must be right, because none of you think marriage makes people happy. But all of you are wrong. We know from lots of data that marriage makes people happy. Look, here's how happy people are when they're either married, single, or living together. Look at that. This is remarkable. Married people are happier. Not just happier than single people, they're happier than people who are pretending to be married but aren't. This is true also across the lifespan. This is a very typical happiness curve across the lifespan. And what you can see, this is the happiness of unmarried people at different ages. And you can see something that's true of unmarried people. They start out happy when they're young. That's all these nice young people in the back. They're not married, they're happy. And then happiness goes down, 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 down. And then as they get older, about my age and even older than that, they get happy again. What about married people? Well, married people show exactly the same trend, but notice that the two curves never cross. That is, married people start out happier, and they end up happier, and they're happier in the middle. We understand why this curve exists, right? Because the young people back here, you're having a great time, and I'm having a great time, because it's all the middle-aged people in the middle who are doing the work and worrying about us and taking care of us. But we're having a great time in life. Old and young, both are good. But the point here is that being married makes every age better. We know that this effect has been stable for as long as scientists have been measuring happiness, which is maybe since the 1970s. So here are typical curves of married and unmarried people across different years. What do you see? Some years are good, some years are bad. People's happiness goes up and down, depending upon many things that are happening in the world. But the lines never cross. In the worst year, married people are happier than unmarried people in the best year. Now, some of you are trained scientifically, and some of you are just damn smart, and you are asking a question. Does correlation equal causation? In other words, you've just shown me, Professor, that married people are happier, but that doesn't mean marriage made them happier. Maybe happiness made them married, right? If you had to marry Eeyore or Piglet, who would you marry? Eeyore or Piglet? Piglet is the character from Winnie the Pooh who's always happy and always dancing. And Eeyore's the one who's always sad. Who do you want to wake up next to for the rest of your life? I would find both of them very annoying, but I would find Eeyore more annoying, right? Piglet wakes up every morning, "Hi, it's so nice to be married to you. What do you want to do?" Okay, that's a little annoying, but it's not nearly as bad as, "I hate life." We know that happy people do better on the marriage market. Everyone would rather marry someone who's happy. So yes, happiness creates marriage. But we also know from looking at data that marriage creates happiness. How do we know this? Because when we look at data showing what happens to people as they approach their weddings and then past their weddings, whether these are Eeyores or whether they are Piglets, here's what we see. This is a typical curve. People start out in life, it's okay, and then they meet somebody, and then they get married, and they're very happy, and there's a little bump here we call the honeymoon period, where people just think life is fantastic, and then their happiness starts to go down. Now, notice something. After 6 years, it's still not down to where it was before the wedding. If I were to draw the line all the way out to here, would that curve ever come back to where it started? Yes. I'm sorry, yes, it does. The joy of marriage wears off. It's short-lived, maybe 20 years. Okay, let me see. 20 years for saying I and do. That's a pretty good investment. 2 words. You can even just say yes, tak, yes, that's enough. And you get 20 years of happiness out of it. That's a pretty good investment. Oh, by the way, since I've just shown you that marriage makes people happy, You're probably imagining that divorce, the opposite of marriage, must make people very unhappy, and actually that's not true. Divorce makes people extremely happy. It makes men very happy. Women, who are a little more happy before the divorce, don't get quite as much of a boost, but they too get happier after a divorce. Both men and women get happier after divorce. How is this possible? Wait, didn't you just say they get happier after marriage? How do they get happier after divorce? Is the recipe for happiness get married and divorced, and married and divorced, and married and divorced? No, maybe if you are a Hollywood star, but not for most of us. What these data are telling us is very important. They're saying it's not just marriage that makes us happy, it's a good marriage that makes us happy. It's a marriage that is at least good enough that we don't get divorced. I forgot to put up one more slide, and I should just tell you about it. I've shown you, and you can see here, that men do a little better than women after divorce. And this may be making some of the women feel a little sad, so I should tell you that after the death of a spouse, these curves are reversed. So after a spouse dies, women actually do better than men do. So if your husband says, "I'm leaving you," you should kill him, because it's... Did that translate? Thumbs up, thank you. Okay, money. If you ask people, I did a TV show in America and I stood out on the street and I said, "Excuse me, sir, do you think money buys happiness? Excuse me, ma'am, do you think money buys happiness?" And almost everybody would say, "Oh, no, money doesn't buy happiness. No. Money's nice, but happiness comes from within, or happiness comes from love, or happiness comes from God, or happiness comes from my dog, or happiness comes from poetry. They always from something except for money." Are they right? Does money buy happiness? You bet it does. Yes, sir, money buys happiness. Thousands of studies from economists show that the more money you earn, the happier you are. But do you notice something about the relationship between money and happiness? That line isn't flat, it's curved. And this is very, very important, because what it tells us is that money makes you very happy when you have very little and you suddenly have a little more. But it doesn't really make you happy when you have a lot and you get some more. A little money makes you happy. A lot of money doesn't make you much happier. When you move people from poverty into the middle class, you change their lives. Their happiness goes way, way up. It isn't fun to be poor. But when you move people from the middle class to the rich, it makes them a little happier, but not much. You can all see that there is a point on this curve where the line kind of bends. You would be surprised to find that it's at about 230,000 zlotys per year. Now, that's a good salary. That's not bad. But it's not Bill Gates. It's not super rich, right? And yet, if you earn this amount today, you have gained 95% of the happiness that anybody can ever get from money. And all of the riches you may get after that are just an attempt to get the missing 5%. Now, why is this line curved? Why is it that having a lot of money doesn't make people happier and happier? Well, one possibility is, happiness, money is like a pierogi, right? The first one is fantastic, the second one is good, the third one's pretty good, the fourth one is too much, the fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, ninth, 10th, they get worse and worse. At the end, it's not good to have too many pierogis. Maybe zlotys are like that. But there's another possibility. Economists like to say, if money doesn't make you happy, then maybe you're not spending it right. It turns out this is true. The things people do with money are often the wrong things. One of the reasons money doesn't continue to make us happy as we earn it is we spend it the wrong way. I'll show you some data. I'm going to show you data that show how happy people are when they are engaged in a number of everyday, normal activities. Working, driving to work, watching television, talking, having sex, resting. Okay, don't ask me how we get these data. I'll tell you later. But these are very good data. And here's what we see. Okay, so scientists have discovered that human beings enjoy sex. You all knew this. You all knew that sex was better than TV, and you all knew that TV was better than work, at least for most people. But here's the data that I hope surprise you. How happy are people when they're resting? The answer is they're about as happy as when they're working. They're about as happy as when they're commuting. They're not nearly as happy as when they're talking or making love. Why? Because when people rest, when they do nothing, their minds start to wander, and they start to think about the things that worry them. They start to consider their anxieties, and they're not very happy. Now, why do I show you this graph? Because if you ask most people, what would you do if you were rich? If you won the lottery, they say, I would rest. Some version of I would rest. I would quit my job. I would stop doing all the stupid things I have to do. I would just buy a boat and sail and rest. That's a very bad answer. The right answer is I would have sex while the TV is on, or I would talk while the TV is on, or I would talk during sex while the TV is on, but not resting. People have the wrong idea about the activities that they should buy that will bring them happiness. Well, what things should they do with their money? We know at least 2 things from research that make people happy to their own surprise. First, if you had a choice between getting a car and getting a month all-expense-paid vacation in Paris, almost everyone here would take the car. You would say, it's a better investment. I can have the car for years to come. When I'm done, I can sell the car. Okay, this is all true, but it will not make you as happy. Because we know that experiences make people happier than material things. Why? Because experiences, first, are things we do with other people, and our relationships with other people are a primary source of happiness. Second, we know that experiences are very hard to compare, right? If I have a car and you have a car, I wonder why my car doesn't have that nice little silver piece on it and yours does. But if I have a month in Paris and you learn to fly an airplane, how do I compare these things? Which one is better? It isn't really obvious. So experiences minimize jealousy and they maximize our social relationships. And as a result, you are probably going to be happier if you take that month in Paris than if you buy the car. Look, if you get the car, I guarantee you someday you will say, that thing is so bad I want to sell it. You will never take all your photographs from your month in Paris and say, I'm so tired of these stupid photographs, I'm putting them on eBay so somebody who's never had a vacation in Paris can have. No, they'll get better with time. 30 years from now, it'll be even better. The car will be rusting in your driveway. Now, the second thing we know, and I'm not saying, I'm not your priest, I'm not your rabbi, I'm not your imam, I'm not here to tell you to be good. It just turns out that science shows that when people buy things for others, they experience more happiness than when they buy things for themselves. You can do a very simple test. When you go out to buy a coffee or a pretzel tomorrow, whatever you buy in the morning, it's a small thing, it doesn't cost too much, buy one for the person in back of you and just see what happens. That person will be astounded. They'll just look at you and say, really? Thank you, that's so kind of you. This is such an important thing for me. My wife just left me and nobody has been very nice. And this is, you've restored my faith in human beings. Okay, now compare the experience you would get from doing this to the experience you would get by getting 2 pretzels instead of 1. It wouldn't make a difference, would it? Research shows that people are usually happier when they spend their money on other people than on themselves. Okay, this is the last thing I want to talk about. This should be very easy. My mother told me marriage. She was right about that, pretty much. My mother told me money. She was right about that, pretty much. And of course, she told me children. In English, a phrase we use for children is we call them a bundle of joy, like a little package of happiness. The word, maybe there's something like this in Polish, but the word for children says happiness in it. So of course, everybody knows children are a great source of happiness. Everybody knows this except people who have them. That's right, because when you measure the happiness of people, and these are people in the United States, Canada, all over the world, all over Europe, when you measure their happiness, you find this pattern over and over. People without children are more happy than people who have them. And the people who have them are the least happy when their children actually live with them instead of living somewhere else. Now that's kind of an astounding pattern. My mother did not tell me to expect that. Here are some other data my mother did not tell me to expect. You can follow the happiness of people as they move towards having their first child, and then as they move past that event. What do you see? Well, here's what my mother predicted. My mother said, you will see this yellow line, life will be okay, and then you'll have a child, and you will be happier than you were beforehand. Well, was she right? Data from thousands and thousands of people give us this line instead. My mother was right about life before children, but really wrong afterwards. Now, again, if I take this line and draw all the way out, you're looking at 4 years after the birth of a child. What if it were 8 and 10 and 20? Does happiness ever come back to where it was before you had children? Many studies suggest no, never. Some studies suggest yes, but only long after your children grow up and move away. And then you don't get happier than the people without children, you just finally catch up to them. Okay, look at this. You might ask yourself, well, maybe actually the act of having children does something to our biology that makes us less happy. You've all heard of postpartum depression. Maybe it just lasts for 50 years, right? Actually, no, because if we compare the happiness of women who have children and don't have children, we find that their happiness is equal as long as the women have jobs. As long as the women are not spending their day with the child, then they seem to be just as happy as women who don't have kids. But if they are at home all day with their children, their rates of depression are almost twice as high. Here's a very nice study. I like this study a lot. This was done by a man who went on to win the Nobel Prize in economics. And he just measured the happiness of about 1,000 women as they went about their day and did different things. And here's what he found. Women are happy when they're talking to their friends, and they're happy when they're eating. Of course they are. These are two very enjoyable human activities. He also discovered women, for some reason, don't like shopping for food, and they really don't like cleaning the house. Okay, you all expected this. Here was the question he wanted to answer. How happy are women when they are just in the presence of their own children? And the answer was they're about as happy as when they're doing housework. It's not even as good as shopping, and it's nowhere close to talking and eating. Now, if you are like me, you may laugh, you may not laugh, but these data seem completely stupid. They can't possibly be right, can they? I'm a father, and I know in many ways my son has brought me more happiness than anything really until my grandchildren, and they even brought me more. Every parent feels, not every parent, but most parents feel that their children are not only a source of happiness, but probably the greatest source of happiness. How do we reconcile our feelings, our intuitions about this matter with the data that have been collected by hundreds of researchers over decades of time that all suggest, I'm sorry, but on average, this simply isn't true? Well, if you're like most people, you say, I have one experience, science tells me another thing, so science is wrong. But I'm a scientist, and we're not allowed to do that. When we find a conflict between our intuitions and the data, we have to believe the data and try to understand what's wrong with our intuitions. This is what you have to do if you're a scientist. The world looks flat. Everywhere I look, flat, 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 flat. But pictures from space tell me it's round. I can't just go, well, that's crazy. It's not round. I can see it's flat. I have to believe the pictures from space, even though they aren't what I see with my own eyes. What I've been showing you here in these data about happiness is a view of human happiness from space. I'm showing you what happens when you measure the happiness of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people over time and ask questions like, are the ones with children more happy or less happy? Do people get happier or less happy over time? What you see are the data I showed you. So why does it seem to us that children bring happiness when the data suggests that the opposite is the case? One possibility, if you're thinking this doesn't describe my life, one possibility is it doesn't describe your life. I'm just telling you about people on average. You're not average, are you? You're all here at the Copernicus Festival tonight. You are not the average person. You're not the average European. You're not the average human being. What I'm telling you about children and happiness is true when we look across large populations of people, but it's not true of everyone. Let me show you who it is true for and who it isn't. So first of all, it varies dramatically by geography. It varies dramatically by country. In the last large survey of the world, Montenegro and Macedonia were the countries with the highest premium and the highest penalty for children. In other words, in Macedonia, people with children were much less happy than people without them. But the opposite was true in Montenegro. It was people with children who were the happiest and the people without children who were the least happy. You can see that the world average, which is what I've been talking to you about, is a little bit on this side of the graph, meaning that across the world, on average, parents are less happy than non-parents. But it does differ by country. So here's my country, the United States. We are just about at zero. If you live in the US, it barely makes any difference whether you do or don't have kids. Your happiness doesn't seem to be much affected. What about Poland? Poland last year had a pretty negative child effect. That is, in Poland, people who had children were significantly less happy than those who don't. About 2/3 of the countries on Earth show this effect over here, a negative effect of children, and about 1/3 show a positive effect of children. It also differs by marital status. So as you can see, married people show very little difference whether they do or don't have children. But single and divorced people are much less happy if they have children than if they don't. On the other hand, widowed people, people whose spouse has died, are much happier if they have kids than if they don't. We see this also differs by age. And look at this, the ages just line up perfectly. The older you are when you have children, the happier they make you. If you have them when you're very young, they're likely to make you unhappy rather than happy. Now, if we put all of these together, what do we see? Oh, one more, I'm sorry. I want to show you by gender. This surprises most people. Most people think women are the nurturing gender. They're the ones who love the children. The men, maybe not so much. Well, I don't know, but what we do know is that women show the biggest negative effect of children, bigger than the effect for men across the world. What do all these data add up to? What these data suggest is really very simple, and I think it's something all of you knew. Children are very hard work. They can be a joy, but you work very hard for that joy. Who works the hardest? People who are single instead of having a partner. Women work much harder raising children in every country, including Sweden, than men. Who else works very hard? young people who don't have much money rather than older people who have more. If you put all these data together, you can see that children make their parents unhappy on average because they're making their parents work very, very hard. Okay, so my mother told me 3 things about happiness: marriage, money, and children. Was she right? Well, she was kind of right about marriage. She forgot to tell me that you only get happiness from marriage if it's a good one, so I had to have more than one to figure this out by myself, but okay, I finally got it. Money, she told me money would buy happiness. She forgot to mention I didn't need that much of it, just enough, but not so much. A little money buys a lot buys only a little bit more. And children, well, let's just say that for the majority of people in the world, children don't bring as much happiness as they could or as they should. So I began with this question: why don't we know what will make us happy? And I've given you 3 answers. First, the mind is more resilient than it knows. Second, the mind is a prisoner of the present. And third, your mother isn't always right, no matter what she tells you. Copernicus said these words. Most of what he wrote was about astronomy, but a few things he wrote were about science in general. And I love this quote. He said, "The ability to shed light on subjects which by their very nature are enveloped in a thick fog is not unimportant." That's an understatement. It is remarkably important. Happiness matters a lot to human beings. It is the reason we do most of the things we do. And yet, where do we turn for answers about happiness? We turn to our imaginations and we turn to our mothers. Look, I love my imagination, but I don't use it when I have questions about what makes a star explode. I ask scientists. I love my mother, but I don't ask her questions about what makes a microbe multiply. She's not a scientist. I ask scientists instead. We ask our imaginations for many things and our mothers for many things, but sometimes the things we ask for are things they can't give us. And when we are asking about facts about the world, we need to ask science. What makes human beings happy is a fact about the world. And in the last few decades, psychologists and economists, neuroscientists, and others have been gathering these facts. I've shared a few of them with you today because I truly believe that what makes human beings happy is a fact, and that the more we can learn about it, the more likely we all are to be able to find it. Thank you very much for your kind attention and your invitation.
Ladies and gentlemen, Daniel Gilbert. I hope this is the most happiest man in the world.
Thank you so much. I'm told by my friend
Yes,
that
we've got
it's time
about-
for you to talk.
Yes, a little bit, just one sentence. We've got about 12 minutes for questions, so this is the time for you. The headphones are here, so if the questions were in Polish, you can listen it. Szanowni Państwo, pytania. Mamy około 12 minut. Pierwsze pytanie na samej górze. Już postaramy się dotrzeć z mikrofonem. Przypominam, że musimy mieć mikrofon, żeby tłumacze mogli pracować.
And you will call on people for me?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. I can't see because of the lights, so thank you.
I'm here for you.
I'm here for you.
Okay, we're ready.
Hello. Oh. Thank you for a fantastic lecture. There was a lot of different interesting subjects, and one I would like to present or ask you for your opinion, because I'm the kind of person who have a problem to recover after bad happenings. I mean, it takes me a lot, and it creates me a pain. You show that 75% about people who are resilient, and Quite famous recently British psychologist Kevin Dutton, with his book The Wisdom of Psychopaths, present that those people have easier to get success because they are not touched so much by happenings. And I always wanted to be a bit of soft psychopath. I tried to learn that. But then today, I've learned that these 75% are soft psychopaths, and they are okay, and I am sick because I'm not resilient. And I really feel like that. But it's also the question that something which normally we say someone is bold and can handle with difficult situation. We try to explain that he is not so deep in his feeling and so on, so on, so on. But at the end of the day, you say it's okay, and that's how the human person should be constructed. Am I right?
No, I don't think I agree entirely with you, but maybe I don't quite understand your question. I think you're saying, did you just tell us that people just do fine no matter what happens to them? And the answer is no. Some people do fine. You all knew that. Some people do terribly. You all knew that. What I tried to teach you was something I didn't know until I looked at the data, and maybe you didn't, which is more people do fine than do terribly. I always thought most people did terribly, and being resilient was very rare. It was a magical ability. It turns out it's the most common of all the reactions to trauma and tragedy. The reason I bring it up is because although we have this remarkable capacity to say, you know, I'm glad I'm not a Beatle. Before you get kicked out of the Beatles, you can't imagine saying that. So that's why it's so important. It makes it very hard for us to imagine being resilient in the future when we think almost all of us are going to be devastated instead.
Okay, the next question.
Well, I start by remarking that the singer who I thought who was my favorite singer 10 years ago is still my favorite singer and died last year. Second remark is that I've never been happier since giving up completely on the search for happiness. And it does seem, at least in my own experience, I don't know about that of others, that happiness is in fact a byproduct that happens whilst you're engaged in doing things that are far more important than looking for happiness, like trying to benefit other people.
I like all of your remarks very much. I too have the same favorite singer for the last 10 years, but that says more about our age than our wisdom. We probably haven't listened to any new music in the last 10 years, so it's hard to have a new favorite singer. I think your point about not looking for happiness in order to find it is well taken. People who are searching for happiness as a goal often find it more difficult to attain than people who just do the everyday normal things that bring it about. Many people will ask me, they'll say, you've studied happiness for 20 years. You know, what's the thing that people could do to make themselves happier? And then I tell them, and they say, yeah, but I didn't mean that. What's the other thing people can do? Because the answer is, you could spend more time with your family and friends. You could probably sleep a little better, lose some weight, don't drink so much. And they're looking at me like, that's boring. My doctor and my mother tell me those things. Well, I'm sorry, they're right. So people who are going about the search for happiness, rather than simply having good social relationships, trying to do work that they find interesting and fulfilling, trying to work in a place where they feel respected, those people are less likely to find it than somebody who is just going about their life doing the right things.
Thank you for the lecture. I have two questions, actually. The first one is about the genetic and epigenetic makeup and the happiness. So the question is, we know, or at least as far as I know, that people who are high in the trait neurotism experience being less happy. And as you mentioned, the rationalization process is helping people to also be happier, not to experience so many negative thoughts. Is there any schemes of thinking that can reduce or mitigate the negative feelings or like correlate positively with happiness, like rationalization or certain kind of thinking? So that is the first question.
Okay, I'm at the age where if you ask me a second question, I will forget the first.
Okay, so
Sometimes I may forget the first before you ask me the second question. So what was your question? No, I'm kidding. First of all, you mentioned genetics, and we do know genetics plays some role in people's overall happiness. It would be surprising otherwise. Your genes determine the blueprint of the structure of your brain. Your brain produces all of the thoughts and feelings you experience. Of course, the way your brain is wired has some effect on your happiness. How much is that effect? Is it big? Is it small? We think it's medium-sized, but it really doesn't matter how big it is because you can't change your genes. All you can do is worry about the part of your happiness that is under your control, not the part you may have inherited through biology from your parents. You asked, well, what are the things people can do? Is there a way to learn to think about the world so that you'll be happier? Yes, that is the basis for psychotherapy. Most of the time when you go to see a therapist, if you're having problems in your life or in your relationship, you're feeling sad more often than you should, mainly what therapists today in the Western world will do is they will do something called cognitive behavioral therapy. But basically, it's a way of teaching you to see and think about the world differently, to think about your behavior differently. It's just changing the way you think. Shakespeare said, nothing is good or bad, it's thinking that makes it so. And of course we can teach people to think in different ways. That's what we do at universities when we teach them to think in different ways about everything from politics to science. And that's what we do with people who are experiencing less happiness in their lives than they should. This ability is learnable. It doesn't mean you can become the happiest person who ever lived, but almost everybody can learn to be happier than they are.
We've got just time for just one short question. This lady, please.
Thank you very much for your lecture. I would like to ask, how can you measure happiness of people? I mean, there are surveys, but still, is it as simple as that, as asking them if they are happy, or there are like more detailed questions in survey?
What a wonderful question. I've just gone on for an hour saying scientists measure happiness, measure happiness, measure happiness. Wait a minute. How do you measure something like a feeling? How can you measure the way a person feels or thinks or sees the world? Well, some people think you can't. Usually when I talk to economists, they say, oh, you can't measure happiness by asking people questions. Really? How did I get these glasses? Well, I went into an office and somebody showed me things and said, does it look better to you like this or like this? Like that or like that? And just by listening to what I said about how the world looked to me, she was able to give me a lens that perfectly corrects my vision. That's amazing. And what an optometrist teaches us is that if you listen closely to people and you ask the right questions about how they see the world, you can use science to learn things about them. Now, scientists use many methods of measuring happiness. We use methods that range from, biological. I can do a brain scan, for example, and when there's more blood flow on one side than the other, that usually indicates you're feeling good. I can use electromyography to look at the little muscle movements in your face, because when people are happy, their zygomatic major muscle lifts and they make a little bit of a smile. I can do all sorts of things, but you know what? It turns out saying to people, on a scale of 1 to 10, about how do you feel right now, is just as good as those other methods. So we use lots of methods to measure happiness, but it turns out the very easy one, the very simple one, of simply asking people to tell you how they're feeling at that moment is as reliable as any other. And that's why we're able to have a science of happiness. You can only do science if you can measure things, and we can't measure it very precisely. That's why we measure thousands of people instead of just 3, but measure it we can.
Ladies and gentlemen, unfortunately, we do not have any time for next question. So, Daniel Gilbert, let's give him a huge applause. Zapraszamy na krótką przerwę, ponieważ musimy przearanżować scenę.